So in typical BASSFZz fashion, I am late to the party, but only because I have to spend days and sometimes weeks constantly mulling over what I'm going to say so I don't look like a dumbass, which is something that a lot of people should really start doing, but they won't. So there's been a little bit of a debate, not really, about objective morality and how it's not a thing. So I decided I'll make a video chatting about it. I mean, I've always wanted to make a video chatting about it, just never got around to it because I worked on other video projects. So now I'm going to talk about objective morality and why subject morality, whether or not it exists or doesn't exist, cannot function in any coherent way or in any useful way. And don't worry, I'll explain as the video goes on. So now, whenever you start off having a philosophical discussion, it really helps when you define your terms and explain exactly what you mean. In order to have any type of discussion or anything, you need a criteria, something that it's based on. Which again is something that is surprisingly lacking when people start talking about philosophical concepts. I don't understand why people don't do that. Anyway, so when it comes to objective morality, I guess the definition that we'll be using for this video, which seems to be consistent upon most people who use the term objective morality, is a set of moral guidelines that exist independent of people's personal feelings. Which is more or less the definition of anything that is objective, something that is consistent and exists independent of how anyone feels about it. I guess that's the best layman terms or simple terms I could explain this concept. Well, I guess subjective morality would be a moral framework that is consistent on each person's individual feelings. And again, I would actually argue, ironically enough, that everybody has an objective moral framework and that a subjective moral framework cannot function in any society at all. And again, like I said, I'll explain it in a second. You just have to bear with me. I'll get there, okay? So, of course, before we go anywhere in the video, I should probably answer the question that everyone's asking. And that is, Zers, if there are lots of people who claim to be moral relativists, you know, and there are lots of atheists even out there who say that they only believe personally what they feel, and they don't believe that there even is a concept of right or wrong. Something that I heard a lot in these Prager University responses, that they don't even, like, literally, I've heard them say they don't think that right and wrong is even a thing, or good and evil is even a concept that exists. So you're probably asking, Zers, if people can say that, then how could you possibly come to the conclusion that people believe in objective morality? Well, I will explain it now, dear viewer. Okay, are you ready for this? Okay. See, the interesting thing about objective morality is a lot of atheists are right so far in the sense that God does not need to exist in order for objective morality to be a thing. What does need to exist for objective morality to be a thing is a standard of which you measure what is good and what is bad. And, well, everybody has a standard of which they judge what is good and what is bad. A standard being something that is, or some type of philosophical concept that is consistent, again, independent of how anyone feels. For example, let's take measurements, right? 1 mile is 1 mile to every American, independent of how you feel about it. How did we come to a mile being a mile? You'd have to go research that yourself. Some guy probably just arbitrarily decided that a mile would be a mile. It really doesn't matter if a mile is arbitrarily decided to be that way. What matters is the fact that a mile is something that we all understand, and a mile is what it is, independent of how you feel about it. It doesn't matter how you feel on Tuesday. If you're mad or sad, a mile is still a mile. It'll still take you X amount of minutes to get to the supermarket if it's a mile away. Right? So a standard, again, is a unit of measurement, and I guess in this case, in the philosophical sense, it is a standard or a consistent idea that does not change independent of people's feelings. So since everybody has a standard of how they feel about, or a standard of which they judge what is good and what is bad, everyone would indeed have an objective moral framework, because their standard exists independent of how they feel about something. And I'll show you a couple examples in just a second. I will complete the thought that I was making before I explain what a standard was. And that is, a lot of atheists are correct so far as you do not need God, or God does not need to exist in order to have an objective moral framework. What does need to exist, however, is there needs to be some kind of standard of which you judge what is good and what is bad. And again, everyone has that standard, so everyone has an objective moral framework. The interesting thing when it comes to the objective versus subjective moral debate is not whether or not subjective morality is even a thing, or whether or not objective morality is a thing. The real question is, what are people's standards? And I'll get into that again later as the video goes on, but it's very important that we understand my foundation for my argument and why I totally believe that I am correct, because well, I am. And I know I sound arrogant, but I am correct. Hell, even if you watch a bunch of the videos that the atheist responses made to Prager University, you could find in every single video that there is indeed a standard of which they objectively measure what they think is good and what they think is bad, despite the fact that they say they don't believe that these concepts even exist. Now, what I believe to be one of the simplest arguments that proves that objective morality is a thing that we all have is ironically the same counterpoint I've seen a lot of people make that suggests that we don't have objective morality. And that is, if, well, they quotation, if we have objective morality, then why do we have to debate what's wrong and right all the time? Or why is it that we don't all agree if morality is objective? That's the quote. But the thing that I find to be silly at all is the mere fact that because we debate and argue about it, it means that we believe that in some metric it is objective. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to have a fucking debate about it. You don't have arguments about whether or not chocolate ice cream tastes good or whether it tastes bad. You just talk about whether you personally think it tastes good. And the reason why that you cannot have an argument as to whether or not chocolate ice cream tastes good or bad is because there's no standard. It's just based on how it makes you feel as an individual. And how you feel exists solely dependent on you as an entity. However, here's the thing. You can have an objective conversation about whether chocolate ice cream tastes good or bad the moment you introduce a standard that exists independent of how you feel. So, let's not use chocolate ice cream. Let's use cake, for example. Let's say we have vanilla cake in front of us. Now, subjectively, you can say that you like eating cake because it tastes good. You don't really need to explain that. It's got, it's sugar and fatty and milk and eggs and all that good stuff and frosting. It just tastes good. So how do you argue with someone about how good cake tastes? How do you convince someone that cake tastes good? Well, you can't, unless you add a specific criteria that determines whether the quality of the cake is good or not. That criteria, for this example, let's say how moist the cake is. If you say that this cake is good because it is moist, that isn't an objective fact about the cake that exists independent of whether or not you think it tastes good or not. If we're talking about the quality of cake and why it tastes good, and it's because it's moist, it becomes an objective fact about the cake. It exists independent of whether or not you like moist cake or whether or not you think moist is good or not. If that is the criteria we all agree to set on the quality of cake, and the cake is moist, then the cake logically tastes good. It is an objective fact that the cake tastes good. The moment an objective standard, the moment any standard is brought forth, the moment any standard that can exist independent of how I feel is brought into any conversation, it then becomes objective. And the moment it becomes objective, I can then say something is wrong or right. The mere fact that we even use the words wrong and right to describe any moral action itself, again, is proof enough that we all believe in some objective moral framework. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to say that something was morally wrong or something was morally right, because there would be no standard to judge it upon. And if there's no standard to judge it upon, then there's literally no conversation to even be had. It really would just boil down to, well, I like it and I don't like it. And interestingly enough, a lot of the video responses to Prager University just kind of confirmed what Prager was saying, that yes, ultimately, if you believe that you don't have objective morality, you do just say what I like and what I don't like. But what I find silly still is, again, a lot of these video responses to Prager do go on to make objective claims about how people interact with each other. And I'll give you a good example. TJ the Amazing Atheist made a video response to Prager University. And actually at the very beginning of his video, Prager brings up the notion of murder, why murder is wrong. And the reason why Prager brings up why murder is wrong is because he knows not very many people are going to make a case for why murder is a good thing. And he's right. No one really has, and no one really does. So because of that, a lot of the atheists took that in stride, and they thought that they had a really good point by saying, especially TJ the Amazing Atheist, when he says that he doesn't think that morality is objective and it's all based subjectively on how we all feel. Which is a bit of a bastardization of what he said, but I can't quote it verbatim. This is all just generally what he said. So in the first couple of minutes of his video, like probably around the 2.5 minute mark, he starts talking about why we as humans will not accept murder in our society. And he first starts off by explaining that in order for human society to work, everyone has to collectively work together and exchange things or work on different individual things in order to create in his words, a symphony of productivity within humankind. For example, a farmer has to grow lettuce, he has to pick the lettuce, bring the lettuce to a trucker who then brings it to the store, and the only way the trucker even got to the store was because there's a highway that some builders created, all that jazz, all that bullshit. So if we introduce acceptable murder into that, it would create a societal discontention with each other. People would begin to lose trust in one another because they don't want to be killed and they can't trust you. Now, what I find to be completely interesting is the fact that TJ just introduced an objective fact about how this hypothetical society would react to murder. They would stop trusting people around them. People not trusting you is an objective criteria, because either they trust you or they don't. You can prove that they trust you because they fucking trust you, or you can prove they don't trust you because they lie to you, they don't tell you the whole truth, they don't tell you anything at all. Because you have an objective standard, which is we don't kill people because it breaks the societal contention, the societal symphony that we've created. We don't kill people because it makes people not trust us anymore. That is an objective framework. That exists independent of how I feel about anything. Because either you trust something or you don't. It doesn't matter if I don't like if I like killing people and you introduce the fact that I can't kill them because I'll lose their trust. That's an objective fact that exists independent of how I feel about murder, whether I think murder is good or bad. And that's what I mean when I say that we all have an objective moral framework. Hell, what's interesting more is a lot of atheists, besides TJ, will base their moral framework on improving human well-being. That what is morally good is that which increases human well-being. What's morally bad is what produces human suffering. Well, again, those concepts exist independent of how you feel about the world. Because either you help someone or you hurt them. The moment you introduce some kind of standard of which I can prove independent of my feelings towards it, you have created objective morality. And everyone has a standard of which they judge something to be wrong or right. The question that everyone really debates about, the underlying question everyone debates about without realizing it, is what is the standard? To the Christian, the standard is Jesus Christ, or the Lord God. To the atheist, the standard is usually human well-being. Not all atheists, it's not all of them, but to a lot of them, it's human well-being. Now, there are some atheists who do think that objective morality is a thing, and whatever their standard is, they'd have to tell me personally, because I don't know. But that's how objective morality works. And the reason why Prager is saying without God, murder is fine, is because, well, what he was really saying is without a standard, you can't say that anything is wrong or right. And he is correct. Because without something that exists independent of how we feel, we can't judge it as being right or wrong. Because it doesn't exist. So, perhaps what I find to be probably the silliest thing that comes to the whole moral objectivity debate or subjective morality debate is the same people who are saying that morality is based on the collective opinions of everyone in society, or morality is based on the subjective opinions of each individual person, are the same people that don't like Islam. And that really confuses the absolute shit out of me. Because, I mean, if you don't think that something can be wrong or right, then how is it even possible to begin to judge Islam as any sort of problem? You don't have a standard of which you could judge Islam as wrong. You don't have a standard of which to say that killing people is wrong. It's just based on how you feel. And the ultimate question that has to be asked is, if you honestly think that morality is simply based on how you feel or just based on how a society feels, and the question is, well, then why does anyone give a fuck? Hell, I mean, even a better question is, if society, or if morality is based solely on the subjective opinions of each individual in society, how do they even coherently all work together? And that leads me to my greater point about subjective morality and how it's not even a thing that can work. It's not even a thing that can function in any society. See, the interesting thing about any concept that exists is that it only works or only functions between two people to communicate information or to create some type of cohesion or work is because we all agree, no matter what, independent of how we feel, that something exists in and of itself. If we go back to the example of the mile that I used earlier in the video, a mile is as long as a mile is going to be regardless of how you feel on Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday. A mile is what it is. And we all understand that a mile is a length of measure because we all agree it to be. The moment someone starts acting like a mile isn't as long as it is, it creates confusion in terms of effectively communicating information when giving directions to someplace. For example, if I said that the supermarket is a mile away in that direction, and you walk that direction, you know how long a mile is, you'll always get to the supermarket. Now the problem comes when someone doesn't understand how long a mile is, or when someone wants to imply their own subjective interpretation of what a mile is. Because if I thought that a mile was the same length as, say, a kilometer, I would never reach my destination because I would always end up short. 1 mile is equal to 1.6 kilometers about. So I would always stop short if I thought that a kilometer was an equal length as a mile is. That's how we function, even in language. The reason why words carry weight is because we all understand that one word means a particular thing. And sure, that word can change with context if you're using English language. And sure, the meaning of the word can change based on your inflection. But even based on those inflections, again, because we all collectively understand those implications and those connotations and denotations, we all agree that that's what the word means. That's how we communicate information. Every single thing in terms of communication, every single thing in terms of understanding between human beings only functions and works because we all agree on it. The moment someone decides they don't want to agree on something is the moment that communication can no longer exist. Is the moment the communication breaks down. It's the moment things can no longer function. For example, let's look at traffic lights, right? If everyone all understands, right? Green means go, yellow means slow down, red means stop. It literally only takes one person to not adhere to that code that we all collectively agree on when we decide to drive our cars to completely destroy the traffic system. It takes one person to run a red light. It takes one accident to back up traffic for miles depending on the time of day. The reason why the traffic system works is because we all agree that that's the system it works on. Green go, red stop, yellow slow down. The moment one person decides to not adhere to that is the moment it completely breaks down. Well, not completely. But imagine, let's say, instead of having one person break the traffic system, let's say we have 2% of people not adhering to the traffic system. Well, no one would be able to get anywhere if 2% of active cars driving just decided to not listen to the way that the traffic lights work. And this is my foundation for saying that subjective morality cannot function in any fucking society. A lot of atheists I've seen believe that morality comes from the fact that everyone in society all collectively agree on different things. But I would argue the contrary. I would argue that that's not where morality comes from. That's how morality functions. Morality only functions because we all agree on a set principle of things to work on and to do. We don't steal from each other because we all collectively agree that it's a problem. And the interesting thing is, when one person decides to steal, it can completely wreck up a string of individuals that weren't even present. Let's take this for example. Let's say I let my mom borrow my car and someone steals her phone. Now I can't call my mom to talk to her if she gets stranded somewhere. So one act of theft has wrecked 2 people because now I can't get to my car and my mom can't communicate with me. So the thing is, again, morality doesn't stem from the fact that people all agree with each other. It only works because everyone agrees with each other. And if everyone worked on a subjective moral framework that they only did what they believe was okay, what they believe was right, then we would have complete and utter chaos. When one person decides to commit murder, it destroys the lives of thousands of people. One act of murder. Look at the terrorist acts that just recently happened. That was one person decided to kill 5 people. And those 5 people all spring out and web into individuals who didn't have anything to do with what happened. When one person decides to act in their own subjective moral framework, it can completely destroy society cohesion. Or societal cohesion would be the correct word to use there, or correct phrase to use there. Interesting truth is, no one actually makes their moral standings based on what they like and what they don't like. They always justify it based on some type of standard. Whether that standard be human wellness, or that standard be the Lord God, or Allah, or Confucius, or Buddha, or Buddha. Whatever it goes, everybody's moral framework has some kind of standard of which they judge something to be right and to be wrong. Because if they didn't, then they wouldn't be able to say that anything was right or wrong because they have nothing to compare it to. Without a correct thing to compare something to, the comparison literally can't happen. It's null. It doesn't exist. And that my friends, is my convoluted explanation as to how everyone has objective morality. No one has objective morality. And subjective morality wouldn't even be able to function in any societal state because morality only works because we all agree on how to treat each other. So that being said, man, I certainly hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, man, go ahead and click that like button. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below, and as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.